Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Megan Glova. Hospitals in the Triangle are getting creative to conserve vital IV fluids. Joining us now to explain what's being done is WRAL health reporter Grace Hayba. Hi, Grace.
Hey.
So first, I want to hear about the role Hurricane Helene played in all this.
Yeah, so the impact Helene had on the healthcare system is really widespread, and it's largely due to just one single manufacturing facility that's here in Marion, North Carolina. Now, that's an area that's about 40 minutes away from Asheville. I know a lot of people listening to this know where Asheville is, so I tend to use that as a good locator guidance. And as we all know, that area was hit with just a ton of heavy rain and mud, and a lot of damage was caused by Helene. Now, I think this was a facility that a lot of people hadn't heard of, they weren't aware of. I personally had no idea how much this facility has to do with our nation's supply. And so this one Baxter plant alone produces about 1.5 million IV fluid bags a day. And now that's a huge quantity. It sounds like a lot, right? Lots of different sizes of them too that are all used for various different things in hospital systems across the country. And it actually equates to about 60% of our nation's supply. Again, that's all coming out of this one facility here in North Carolina. So it's not just our hospitals in the Triangle that are now feeling the effects, but it's really everywhere. And the ultimate result is that hospitals across the country are now receiving anywhere from 40 to 60% less shipments of these vital IV fluids than normal. And the extent to which that reduction is really going to impact operations is largely going to hinge on just how big that facility is. Are we talking about a small clinic that's losing 40 to 60%, or are we talking about a larger hospital system like here in the Triangle? So yeah, the extent of how much they're going to feel that really depends on how large that facility is.
Right, just another unfortunate Helene impact. And again, there's a pretty creative solution here with quite an accessible product. So could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it's actually using Gatorade as a supplement. Now, again, this isn't every single person who needs an IV bag is going to be getting Gatorade. That's not it at all. But they are really used a lot of times to treat patients with dehydration, especially mild cases. And a doctor I spoke with Duke said, we often kind of pull on this lever of using these IV fluid bags, probably more so than we really need to, simply because we don't usually have to think about the accessibility of them. We just have a lot of them. But Gatorade is used a lot. WakeMed explained it's actually part of an evidence-based protocol used by a lot of hospital systems called Enhanced Recovery After Surgery. It's known by those in healthcare as ERAS. And basically, hydrating before surgery has been shown to help patients in their recovery. So Gatorade is often used as part of that protocol given to patients, and it's specifically formulated to help replenish your electrolytes, rebalance your system. We obviously know it with athletes and things like that, right? We get it in the grocery stores. Well, it's mainly used in hospitals for rehydration purposes as well. So now really what our hospitals are doing are just looking at, okay, we have all these patients. Instead of reaching for these IV bags that maybe we would commonly use in the past, since we know that we have a shortened supply, let's see which patients we could instead use an alternate method for instead. And those with UNC Medical Center, for example, explained Gatorade prior to all of this was often used when treating younger patients specifically. And they said it's really just to help prevent a child from having to undergo another painful IV stick, and just, having them drink a Gatorade or maybe other types of juices in some cases can ultimately do the same work. So again, not every single patient is going to be able to drink Gatorade instead, but for those that are, it helps them conserve these vital bags.
Right, just got to be a little more particular. So how do doctors decide who gets IV fluids and who doesn't at this moment in time?
Yeah, it would really just come down to who would be considered critical. So hospitals, the good news right now, especially here in the Triangle, they are really doing okay in terms of their supply. Again, we have 3 huge hospital systems in our area. So like I was mentioning earlier, the quantity that we receive is going to far surpass that of a smaller clinic, smaller hospital elsewhere as well. So, and the Triangle hospitals, they're not in a dire situation right now, but supplementing using Gatorade, even Pedialyte, and other types of oral medications in some cases too, it's all helping reduce the impacts of these or of the shortage, because patients being treated for something like mild dehydration, for example, could be given that Gatorade right now instead of given an IV bag and then saving that for someone who's more critical. So a time when that could come into play is maybe, someone comes in, they have mild dehydration, they have very minimal symptoms, maybe a little bit of stomach cramping, things like that. But overall, like good veins, their body can swallow, and their stomach could tolerate consuming something like Gatorade. They'd likely be a good candidate then for a supplement like Gatorade or Pedialyte, so that staff could reserve a bag, again, that usually would just be given to them, and they'd be getting an IV and these administered through fluids instead. They can get those fluids just by drinking instead. But, that's not going to be the case, again, for everybody. So it's just weighing out who could be a good candidate for it and who couldn't.
All right. And why is a solution like this so necessary? The last thing these hospitals want is to run out of IV bags and then someone critical does come through the door and is in desperate need of one.
Yeah, that's what hospitals are here for, right? They're to treat us in our worst times. Sometimes we go to them for more minor illnesses, bumps, cuts, things like that, or there are instances of severe trauma. And especially here in the Triangle, all three of our major hospital systems are really turned to throughout the state for those larger transfers of very critical patients. So it's really to make sure that our hospitals are able to stay the way that they are right now, which is still able to provide that care. We want to make sure that those doors are able to stay open for those critical traumas, invasive surgeries, people undergoing therapies and treatments like chemotherapy. Those are all things that cannot wait. So when it comes down to a hospital looking at a supply of bags that they have, knowing that they're not going to get another shipment for a while, and even when they get that shipment, it's going to be less, they're going to have to weigh, again, which patients are good candidates for something like Gatorade to save those bags for someone else who just, right now, we might not know. There could be a trauma coming in the next 10 minutes and someone really needs those. So it's just kind of a fluid, no pun intended, situation that they're just going to have to continue to monitor.
So what's next for that Baxter plant? Is pre-Helene production still a ways away, and how long will hospitals have to do this?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I was asking multiple health officials at all three hospitals this week. Like, hey, have you been hearing anything? And everyone is in contact with the Baxter plant. Every single hospital system, they're talking to each other even, and internally they have their own measures in place and teams constantly monitoring the situation. And as of October 9th, the Baxter plant had released a statement saying the goal is for the North Cove production, that's, again, the plant in Marion here in North Carolina, the goal is for it to resume production in phases by the end of this year. Now, exactly what that means, we don't really know. It was a very short, hey, this is our goal, but the extent of the damage is still largely unknown. And the company says it doesn't yet have a timeline for when we could see it operate again at its pre-Helene production levels. So that would be back to producing, again, the 60% of our nation's supply of these vital fluids. So the thing to keep in mind, though, with reopening this facility as a whole is that it manufactures very sterile medical material. It has to meet like the highest, levels, and there's so many standards and protocols to keep in mind, and it was flooded. It's totally covered in mud in some places, and we're seeing all of these horrific and tragic images and talking to families, for example, just trying to get back into their own homes, having to strip walls, tear up floors, and, they're worried about mold mitigation. Well, that's all true, too, for this building, potentially, depending on the extent of it. And in addition, it's a medical facility. So again, there's going to be those additional sanitation requirements that would have to be met for something like this to get back up and running. Now, we haven't been able to see inside the building yet, so we don't know just how bad things are really throughout it. But we have obtained some drone footage right in the wake of all of this, of that area that, again, just shows that there's just mud and standing water and huge, debris piles. There's a big bridge even that went into the facility that was badly damaged. There's just a lot of things that were impacted all around the facility. And in one of the drone shots, I noticed you could see 18-wheelers that look like, they're parked in the building, probably being loaded with supplies, like distribution trucks. They were covered. So it seems like the damage, is not just limited to one small area, which is likely why production there came to a halt. And it's having such a big impact because they clearly weren't able to keep some small, area up and running. Depending on how bad that damage is, if they're going to have to, tear out floors, tear out walls, and how long it takes to, again, get things back to that the necessary sanitation levels and requirements for these operations, we just don't know. So hospitals, the long answer of it is hospitals aren't sure. And so that's why they're coming up with these solutions of the Gatorade and the Pedialytes or the other oral medications and weighing which patients are good candidates for those and where it won't affect their care, right? Because that's the last thing any hospital wants to have to do is start making those types of decisions where it does impact patient care. That's what we don't want to see happen. So until then, it's going to be this ebb and flow, and they're going to continue to implement these protocols. And part of that could include postponing non-critical procedures and operations as well. Again, with the FDA adding 3 of these main IV fluids, though, used to its shortage database, there's also hope that international imports, as well as other companies, increasing supply here domestically and able to expand existing operations of maybe other medical materials to now include these IV bags and IV fluids. Hopefully a combination of all of that will help us get back to our pre-Helene levels, even if this Baxter plant doesn't come back online for a while.
Right. All right. Well, we know you'll keep a very close eye on that for us.
Certainly will.
Grace, thanks so much. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news every morning is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox again every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.